we're bringing 4 European bison into the woodlands here. These bison are going to create an open space and really letting light come down to the ground and invigorating the woods here. And that's going to have a massive impact, creating a more resilient site here for future generations and climate change.
4 massive bison were released into an English forest, animals that had been gone for 6,000 years. Just 1 year later, the forest looked completely different, but not in the way anyone expected. Trees were broken, the ground was disturbed.
They like eating the bark around the tree, which over time is going to kill the tree. It's going to create standing deadwood. Just roll around in a little sand pit, and they create these little dust baths, which again are super valuable for burrowing invertebrates and burrowing insects.
Parts of the woodland looked damaged, even ruined. But here's the twist. What seems like destruction is tied to something most people overlook deep inside the forest. A hidden problem that was already there, long before the bison arrived. So what exactly changed? And why does it challenge everything we think a healthy forest should look like? The hidden decline of ancient woodlands. At first glance, Britain's ancient woodlands appear healthy, dense, green, and untouched by time. But beneath that surface, a quiet collapse is unfolding. Decades of human interference, followed by neglect, have turned many of these forests into ecological shells. The canopy looks full, yet life below is fading. Understory plants, insects, birds, and the birds that rely on them have sharply declined, leaving a forest that appears alive but is slowly losing its function. One of the biggest problems is the canopy itself. When it becomes too dense, it blocks sunlight from reaching the forest floor. Without light, the soil cannot support the diverse mix of shrubs, grasses, and wildflowers that once thrived. As plant diversity disappears, so do the insects that depend on them. This triggers a chain reaction that affects birds, bats, and other wildlife. From a distance, the forest still looks complete, but its complexity is gone. This decline is also tied to how these woodlands have been managed over time. For centuries, people used methods like coppicing, controlled burning, and clearing to maintain balance. These techniques created openings in the canopy and encouraged new growth. But many of these practices have been reduced or abandoned. Without consistent intervention, the forest becomes uniform and stagnant, a condition known as ecological hollowing. It may look stable, but it no longer supports the rich web of life it once did. At the center of the issue is something ecologists call structural complexity. This refers to the variety within a forest: open spaces, fallen trees, young shoots, mature trunks, and layered vegetation. In a healthy woodland, this mix creates countless habitats for wildlife. But when the canopy closes and dead wood disappears, that structure breaks down. The forest becomes flat, predictable, and far less capable of supporting biodiversity. Land managers understand the existing problem, but they find it challenging to implement effective solutions. Temporary stability exists through traditional methods, which use coppicing and mechanical clearing methods to achieve restoration. The system needs active maintenance throughout its entire duration. The forest will experience an immediate decline when they stop their work because the canopy will shut, and forest health will begin to fade. The process generates expenses that require continuous funding, workforce, and strategic development, because these resources remain insufficient. British land faces increased difficulty because human activities have extensively modified its natural state. Human activities for agriculture, city development, and building projects have transformed forests into separate small areas. The remaining true wilderness areas have diminished so much that the remaining woodlands display greater vulnerability and reduced ability to recover. The same recovery patterns that occur throughout Europe face more severe challenges in Britain because the country has restricted access to its natural landscapes. The existing solutions continue to struggle because they fail to match the magnitude of the existing problem despite increasing public knowledge about the issue. The ecosystems require continuous human management, which can operate throughout all areas without interruptions. The critical question emerges: what elements are absent from this situation? The ecological community now believes that natural forces should replace human intervention to restore these landscapes to their original conditions. The forests of the area remained under the influence of a strong presence that had existed before people established their modern management systems, because an animal species possessed the ability to break trees and create different ecosystem elements. The process of recovery requires both human intervention and new technologies, because the forest needs to regain its main architect, who can restore its intricate systems simply by existing in that space. The lost presence of a powerful force in the forest invites us to look back before moving forward. Traditional woodland management limits. For centuries, woodland management in Britain relied heavily on practices like coppicing, cutting trees down to encourage new shoots, and controlled burning to clear undergrowth. These techniques were effective in creating gaps in the canopy and promoting new plant growth. When done regularly, they helped maintain a mosaic of habitats, supporting a variety of wildlife adapted to these changing conditions. However, they are not simple or cheap to maintain, and their success depends on ongoing, consistent application. Mechanical clearing is another common method, involving the physical removal of underbrush and deadwood to stimulate growth and reduce fire risk. While it can mimic some natural disturbances, it too requires labor-intensive, repeated efforts. If these interventions are scaled back or halted, the woodland quickly returns to a closed canopy dominated by a few mature trees, closing off light and choking diversity. The cycle repeats, and conservationists grow frustrated by the temporary nature of these results. One of the biggest hurdles is cost. Managing hundreds of acres of woodland demands significant funding for equipment, labor, and planning, often stretching limited conservation budgets. This financial burden makes it unfeasible for many wildlife trusts or local authorities to maintain these interventions indefinitely. As budgets shrink and priorities shift, woodlands are increasingly left to their own devices, further accelerating ecological decline. Beyond finances, there's also the challenge of scale. Human intervention is inherently limited by manpower and access. Unlike natural processes, which act continuously and at various scales, human management tends to be scheduled and localized. This creates patchy impacts rather than the broad, dynamic patterns of disturbance necessary to generate the full complexity of a healthy woodland ecosystem. The traditional methods of forest management practice their core mission of controlling or maintaining forests until they reach their predefined ideal state, which represents the correct appearance of forests. This ideal tends to favor tidy, orderly land that appears well-managed and aesthetically pleasing to people. Nature does not create itself through established patterns. Forest ecosystems reach their highest ecological value when they display natural disturbance patterns through their combination of fallen trees and open soil areas, and their abnormal plant development. The cultural requirements of society clash with the necessary ecological requirements of nature. The British public expects managed land areas to show proper maintenance. Messy woodland with stripped bark, fallen trees, and churned-up soil challenges this deeply held assumption. The active intervention process works to control systems instead of bringing back their complete natural complexity and unpredictability. The existing tension between traditional methods and contemporary needs creates challenges for creating sustainable solutions through these methods. The benefits of these techniques have been demonstrated, yet it is becoming evident that no human-operated system can achieve permanent results through artificial methods, since natural processes constantly change throughout time. Woodlands will suffer from decreasing ecological vitality and structural complexity because they need ongoing environmental changes to produce different habitat types, which sustain diverse life forms. The forest's silent decline shows the maximum human achievement that can be reached through centuries of dedicated work. The missing element that completes the puzzle stems from an animal species that used to inhabit these forests, as its behavior patterns created lasting changes to the landscape over thousands of years. And this species now possesses the ability to restore areas that humans cannot protect. The traditional management techniques fail to protect these ancient woodlands because their loss needs to be understood first. The return of this lost engineer might be the key to a different kind of woodland future. The lost role of European bison. European bison, also known as wisent, were once a common presence in the forests that stretched across Britain and mainland Europe. These were not the open grassland bison most people picture, but creatures adapted to dense woodland environments. Their sheer size and unique behaviors physically shaped the landscape, influencing the forest structure and the balance of plant and animal life within it. For thousands of years, they acted as natural architects of their habitat. Unfortunately, hunting pressure and habitat loss over centuries drove the European bison to extinction in the wild. The last known wild individual was shot in the Caucasus Mountains in 1927, leaving the entire global population down to just a dozen animals in captivity. From this alarming low, every European bison alive today descends. It was a near total loss that took the species to the brink of oblivion and erased it from British woodlands around 6,000 years ago. Despite this long absence, European bison never lost their potential to influence forests profoundly. Over the last century, conservationists have successfully bred and reintroduced them into protected areas across parts of Europe, including Poland, Romania, Germany, and the Netherlands.
European bison has moved a step back from the brink of extinction. The largest land mammal was almost wiped out by hunting and deforestation. Its recovery is now being regarded as a conservation success story. Take a look.
Today, about 7,000 of these majestic animals roam wild in these rewilded landscapes, fulfilling their ancestral role as disturbance engineers. What sets them apart is not only their size — these are the continent's largest land mammals — but also their deep ecological impact. Their actions, such as stripping bark from trees, pushing over individual trunks, wallowing to create soil disturbances, and selectively grazing, all promote structural complexity in ways no other species can replicate. This continuous natural disturbance prevents closed canopies and encourages diverse habitats. Their presence creates a shifting patchwork of microenvironments where deadwood supports thousands of species of beetles, birds, fungi, and bats, and areas of open soil allow specialist plants and insects to take hold. The natural cycle of growth, death, and renewal accelerates under their influence, speeding up ecological processes that would otherwise take decades or longer. In Britain, where these bison have been absent for millennia, woodland ecosystems have no living memory of them. The forest has evolved without this powerful force, meaning many of the structural features bison once created have disappeared. This absence leaves a missing link in the food web and habitat dynamics that human management struggles to replace. The question then becomes whether reintroducing European bison might restore this lost ecological function, offering a sustainable and self-maintaining way to rebuild forest complexity. The answer lies ahead, but understanding the history and role of these animals is essential to grasping the full impact they can have. With their return, the wheels of nature's persistent design could begin turning anew in the heart of England's ancient woodlands. The forest waits quietly, but change is stirring beneath its depths. Reintroducing bison to West Blean. In July 2022, a bold experiment began in West Blean and Thorndon Woods, an ancient forest near Canterbury in Kent. Kent Wildlife Trust, in partnership with the Wildwood Trust, released 1 bull and 3 female European bison into a fenced 350-acre section of this woodland. The goal was clear: the woodland needed saving, and bison were identified as the most effective ecological tool available to restore its balance. These animals were not introduced for their own benefit, but as active agents of change, living machines capable of transforming the forest's structure without human micromanagement. The bison arrived with little fanfare, but carried the weight of thousands of years of lost ecological function. Their release did not include supplementary feeding or controlled direction beyond basic veterinary care. These animals were expected to behave as wild creatures, roaming freely and interacting with their environment in ways shaped by evolution. Unlike traditional conservation projects where animals might be closely managed, here the bison themselves were the managers, disturbance engineers working on nature's timescale. This project stood apart because it embraced disruption rather than control. The usual vision of a managed forest is tidy and orderly, but the bison bring messiness, stripped bark, fallen trees, churned soil, and open canopy gaps. Rather than seeking visual neatness, The project aimed to recreate structural complexity, a condition the forest desperately needed but could not achieve through human labor alone. The bison's behavior had to unfold naturally, without intervention, to trigger the ecological processes that had been absent for millennia. The concept of rewilding at West Blean challenged deep-seated cultural expectations about land management. It acknowledged that a healthy forest is not static or manicured, but dynamic and sometimes chaotic. Trees would fall, and soil would be dug up. Instead of suppressing these changes, the project encouraged them, hoping they would pave the way for new life to flourish. This required a leap of faith in both the animals and the ecology they were meant to restore. The project team used the fenced area to track how bison affected their research work because they intended to observe the animals in their natural behavior. The area was left untouched because the bison could only interact with the existing natural environment. The ecosystem would experience changes because the two species would start to create new environmental conditions, which would benefit plant life, insect species, fungal organisms, and animal species that had been restricted from their natural habitats because of dense tree cover and uniform forest ground. Bringing bison back after 6,000 years was not just about adding a species, it was about restoring an ancient relationship between animal and woodland that once drove forest dynamics across Britain. The project used bison as conservation tools because it treated them as non-threatened species whose presence would support ecosystem restoration. The new understanding developed into fresh approaches for managing natural resources, which included both active management methods and complete natural resource protection. The release contained undisclosed, hidden uncertainty. How would the bison adapt to a modern English forest? Would their behaviors create the necessary disturbance pattern that would lead to structural complexity restoration? Could these enormous animals safely live in a country that has a dense population and strict land use control? The questions created tension and an essential need for answers, which drove the story forward while the forest remained silent until its natural builders would begin their work. The bison first entered this woodland because it triggered both visible and hidden changes in their surroundings. The forest would not achieve its complete complexity restoration through direct human efforts, but the first step toward natural change had been established, which no human could achieve at this scale. Bison transformed not just the forest, but the very idea of human stewardship in the natural world. Bison behaviors, reshaping forests. European bison are not typical grazers. Ecologists describe them as disturbance engineers because of the unique ways their natural behaviors actively shape forest landscapes.
They're the biggest land animal and they have an enormous impact on their environment. They're ecological engineers, really.
Unlike animals that simply feed and rest, bison physically restructure their environment, creating varied habitats essential for biodiversity. At West Blean, 4 key behaviors operate simultaneously, each producing distinct ecological effects that human intervention struggles to mimic. The most visually striking behavior is bark stripping. Bison strip bark from living trees in long, vertical gouges, sometimes completely ring-barking and slaying individual trees. While this may seem like destruction, it actually creates something invaluable: snags or standing dead trees. These structures are critical habitats for over 2,000 species of beetles, birds, bats, and fungi, supporting complex food webs that rely on decaying wood. Normally, snags take decades to develop naturally, but a single bison can produce one in a single season. Tree knockdown is another transformative act. Bison use their massive bodies to push over trees, creating new gaps in the canopy. When a tree falls, it exposes the forest floor to sunlight, allowing sunlight-dependent plants to sprout and thrive. This opening also adds fallen deadwood to the forest floor, an essential component for many decomposers and the animals that depend on them. The resulting patchwork of light and shadow reintroduces the woodland's lost structural complexity in real time.
Wallowing is basically when a bison rolls around in the dirt or the mud, and they do this for a variety of reasons. Now, a wallow, on the other hand, is the actual depression of dirt and mud in which the bison wallows.
Wallowing behavior adds yet another layer of change. Bison roll and churn the soil to create shallow depressions, known as wallows. These exposed earth patches are hotspots for rare insects and plants that cannot grow in dense leaf litter or continuous ground cover. Bare soil patches also aid seed dispersal and germination for species that depend on disturbance to thrive. Each wallow becomes a tiny ecosystem, increasing habitat diversity within the woodland floor. Selective grazing rounds out their ecological impact. Bison show preferences for certain plant species, grazing them selectively and allowing others to flourish. This behavior breaks up uniform ground cover into a diverse mosaic of vegetation types. Such plant diversity at ground level cascades upward, supporting a richer tapestry of insects, birds, and mammals throughout the forest. This dynamic balance supports a much healthier, more resilient ecosystem. Together, these behaviors continuously modify the woodland, creating a complex landscape of canopy gaps, deadwood, disturbed soil, and varied vegetation. This is what ecologists call structural complexity, a diverse physical architecture essential for supporting thriving wildlife communities. Such complexity is almost impossible to maintain through human intervention alone because it requires relentless natural disturbance across large areas and over time. Because the bison act simultaneously in these four ways, their impact is greater than the sum of their parts. Bark stripping and tree knockdown open the canopy and produce deadwood. Wallowing creates bare soil patches. Selective grazing shapes the vegetation mosaic. Combined, they foster an environment that supports far more biodiversity than a closed, uniform woodland. In ecological terms, the bison are the master conductors of this transformation. At West Blean, early observations confirmed these behaviors were already underway within weeks of the bison's release. The physical marks on trees, freshly dug soil pits, and the pattern of grazed vegetation make the changes unmistakable. The forest was responding to these ancient architects as if waking up from a long slumber. This natural process was more effective in a single year than previous decades of human effort. With these visible signs, the woodland began to reclaim the complexity lost for generations, proving that when nature's engineers return, whole ecosystems can rapidly start to heal in ways humans cannot orchestrate. The bison's presence turned the forest from a static green expanse into a living, breathing mosaic of change and renewal. Where the bison move and reshape, the forest begins to tell a story of regeneration beyond any human design. Early ecological changes observed. Within the first year of introducing the European bison to West Blean, the transformation was already unmistakable. Monitoring teams recorded bark stripping on multiple trees with long vertical gouges revealing pale wood beneath, a clear sign of active disturbance. These damaged trees, destined to become snags, marked the beginning of habitat creation on a scale and speed unmatched by any previous human intervention in the woodland. The marks were not isolated, but spread across the fenced area, signaling that the bison were engaging with the environment extensively. Alongside this, several active wallows appeared where the bison rolled and churned the soil. These shallow depressions exposed bare earth in a forest floor that had long been dominated by dense, unbroken vegetation. Such soil disturbance creates vital microhabitats for specialist insects and plants that cannot establish themselves under thick ground cover. Each new wallow acted as a tiny ecological hotspot, encouraging biodiversity to re-emerge and broaden its foothold in the ecosystem. Tree knockdowns were equally notable, as bison pushed over select trees, creating gaps in the canopy. These openings allowed sunshine to penetrate to the woodland floor for the first time in decades, drastically altering the light environment. Ground flora began to respond quickly, with plant species not previously recorded in those sections of the woodland starting to appear. This rapid colonization by new species shows how sunlight and disturbance can unlock dormant pathways for regeneration beneath the trees. Perhaps most surprising was the bison's unexpected behavior towards invasive species. Within weeks, the matriarch was observed uprooting rhododendron plants, an invasive shrub that conventional management had struggled to control for years. She pulled whole plants from the ground and dragged them away, effectively reducing the spread of this threat without human assistance. This self-directed intervention was not part of any management plan, but highlighted the bison's potential for unanticipated ecological benefits. The first evidence shows that bison create physical environments through their activities, which transform forest ecosystems instead of behaving as typical grazers. The combined effect of their four key behaviors, bark stripping, tree knockdown, wallowing, and selective grazing, is already changing the woodland's structural complexity. The process operates continuously without any human oversight because it demonstrates how natural systems operate in their normal state. The rate of structural change observed in just 1 year outpaced previous human-led management efforts in similar areas of the woodland. The research indicates that continued bison activities will lead to recovery, which will extend for multiple decades. The animals create ongoing natural disturbances that human labor cannot reproduce through its efforts to create artificial disturbances. Each behavior creates a moving pattern that enables different species to exist in harmony with each other. The monitoring process will extend until 2050 because ecological changes require extended periods for their complete development, but the initial indicators show favorable results. The bison are moving throughout the entire site rather than staying concentrated in one area, allowing their influence to spread widely. The woodland area achieves complete recovery because its trees grow back in every part of the forest instead of only one specific area, which results in better ecosystem health and resilience. The forest floor has begun to transform into a space that showcases new environmental developments because light gaps and open soil areas bring about conditions that support the growth of multiple plant species. The new habitats will attract insects, fungi, and other creatures that depend on these environments. The woodland speaks a new language now, shaped by giants whose footsteps forge renewal where neglect once ruled. Like all transformations, this revival comes with complex reactions beyond the ecological realm. Controversy and cultural challenges. Despite its ecological promise, the reintroduction of European bison to West Blean has sparked debate. One of the biggest challenges is public perception, what people believe a healthy woodland should look like. Bison do not create neat forests. They leave behind fallen trees, stripped bark, churned soil, and open gaps. To many, this looks like damage. To ecologists, it is a sign of life returning. This clash between appearance and function lies at the heart of the controversy. Britain's landscape makes the issue more complex. It is densely populated and heavily managed, with little true wilderness remaining. Nearly every piece of land is owned, bordered, and regulated. Introducing large animals, each weighing close to 1,000 pounds, raises concerns about safety, liability, and property damage. Even within fenced areas, the idea of these animals moving freely makes some people uneasy, slowing support for wider rewilding efforts. Cultural expectations add another layer. In Britain, well-managed land is often expected to look orderly and controlled. Messy woodland, with dead wood and disturbed soil, is commonly seen as neglected. This contrasts with parts of Eastern Europe, where natural processes and large herbivores are more familiar. Changing this mindset requires education, helping people understand that what looks chaotic is often essential for biodiversity and long-term forest health. Practical concerns also play a major role. Nearby landowners worry about damage to fences, crops, or property values. Questions about responsibility, who is liable if something goes wrong, create legal uncertainty. These issues make scaling up projects like Wilder Blean more complicated, requiring careful balance between ecological goals and community concerns. At the same time, financial pressures are pushing the conversation forward. Traditional woodland management is expensive and often produces only temporary results. Bison, on the other hand, provide constant natural disturbance at a scale humans cannot match. This makes rewilding a more cost-effective long-term solution, though it challenges established approaches and interests. Scientific evidence from countries like the Netherlands and Poland, along with early results in Kent, supports the ecological value of large herbivores. Still, the debate remains unresolved. Supporters see innovation and necessity. Critics highlight safety, aesthetics, and cultural fit. Both sides raise valid points, reflecting a broader challenge of how humans coexist with wildlife in modern landscapes. The Wilder Blean project continues as both an experiment and a test of public acceptance. Its results will shape future decisions on rewilding in Britain. Over time, visible ecological benefits may shift opinions, but change will require patience and open dialogue. Ultimately, this debate goes beyond conservation. It raises deeper questions about identity, values, and our relationship with nature. Can Britain accept a wilder, less controlled landscape? The answer will define the future of its forests and how people reconnect with the natural world. As the forest transforms under bison influence, the surrounding society wrestles with its own transformation, one that must unfold alongside the wild revival. The future of rewilding in Britain. The success at West Blean has fueled optimism for large animal reintroductions across Britain. After the first year, 5 bison were relocated to Cumbria, forming a second herd and signaling growing confidence in their role in restoring forest ecosystems.
And they're offloaded calmly in a new site up north in Cumbria. It could not have gone any better. Personally, for me, the biggest tick was seeing the bison in their new environment, as calm as can be. It exceeded my wildest expectations.
What began as a trial is now emerging as a model for rewilding in human-shaped landscapes. However, scaling these efforts presents challenges. Britain's land is fragmented and densely populated, limiting space for free-roaming animals. Expanding beyond fenced areas would require careful planning around land ownership, safety, and liability, balancing ecological benefits with the concerns of local communities. The ecological advantages that exist from the efforts face numerous challenges, among them which will produce substantial benefits. Bison create new tree destruction through their natural behavior, which results in deadwood creation that enables native species to thrive after their extinction. The process results in ecosystem development, which expands biodiversity through its complete climatic impact that requires multiple generations to present itself. Rewilding provides a sustainable, budget-friendly method that replaces costly practices used for land management work. Bison naturally reshape their habitats through their continuous ecological restoration, which decreases operational expenses while rebuilding native ecosystems that used to exist in these locations. The public must accept the proposal because it requires their support to succeed. Rewilding requires people to change their thinking about nature because it brings disorder to controlled environments through its promotion of unmaintained natural areas. Community participation and educational programs will establish trust, which leads to public support. The research from Poland, the Netherlands, and Germany supports the importance of large herbivores for developing ecosystems that can withstand environmental challenges. The issue about safety, property loss, and system control still exists. Solutions to these problems require both innovative approaches and open communication between different parties. The purpose of rewilding through European bison restoration involves 2 main tasks, which include restoring lost ecological functions and achieving landscape restoration through natural landscape processes. The project presents an attractive environmental plan, which will shape Britain's future environmental development. The return of European bison to British woodlands reveals how rewilding can spark rapid, lasting ecological change. From stripped bark to new plant life, these animals restore complexity beyond human reach. If you're fascinated by nature's resilience and want to see where this story leads, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into incredible conservation journeys. And don't miss the next story already on your screen. It takes this idea even further in a way you probably won't expect.